Well, I am Kelly Borkman. I am the Programs and Outreach Manager for Heartland Rewilding, which is a nonprofit conservation initiative of Project Coyote, the Rewilding Institute, and the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation's Half Earth Project. We are focused mainly in the Midwest, but also the wider Mississippi River watershed, which covers just short of 1/3 of North America. It's a large area, but we encourage voices and individuals from all over the world to join in on our conversations, especially as we're having these webinars, which are part of our Connect the Heartland series and campaign. So in April, we talked about rewilding with beavers. Last month, we talked about Midwest mountain lions. And today, we're going to talk about coyotes and coexistence. We've also got 2 more coming up. So in July, we're going to be talking about bison and rewilding. And then we're going to cap all this off in August, talking about wolves in the Great Lakes. So we've got some great webinars coming up, wonderful presenters, and I just can't wait to share all of that wonderful information with all of you. If you haven't registered for any of the upcoming webinars in our series, you can do so at heartlandrewilding.org/events. I do have the Zoom links up there. And if you've already pre-registered for those, don't worry. They'll be coming to you in the next month or 2. I've got your names. It's all saved. You're going to get the registration link as those get closer. So today, as I mentioned, we're here to talk about coyotes and coexistence. We have Dr. Chris Mowry from the Atlanta Coyote Project and our very own Dr. Francisco Santiago Avila. Just going to talk about all the great stuff from coyotes and the urban environment, to coexistence, to some of our upcoming and current campaigns, and how you guys can help protect these amazing animals. So without further ado, I'm going to let Chris take it away.
Great. Thanks, Kelly, for inviting me. I'm happy to see so many participants today. So thank you for having me. Yes, I am a professor of biology at Berry College, which is just outside of Atlanta. So I'm not in San Francisco, despite my background here. I'm actually in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm going to tell you about my work with what I founded back in 2015, the Atlanta Coyote Project. I'm going to tell you a little bit of background information about coyote biology, natural history, a few of the things we're involved in, and then I'll hand it over to Fran, and he'll talk a bit more about killing contests and coexistence and things like that. So I'm going to share my screen and show you. So, okay, so this picture is actually one we've been accused of photoshopping in the past, but we've not photoshopped this picture. It was taken by my colleague, Larry Wilson, who he and I started the Atlanta Coyote Project together. We were graduate students at Emory University back in the day. But anyway, this is Atlanta's Piedmont Park. It's Atlanta's version of Central Park. It was actually designed by Frederick Olmsted, same landscape architect that did Central Park. So this is an actual picture that was taken in Atlanta. So as I mentioned, I started the Atlanta Coyote Project with my colleague, Larry Wilson. And this was done in 2015. And we have a website that's very extensive, atlantacoyoteproject.org, if you'd like to check out anything that we're up to. But we formed this in 2015, but I've been studying coyotes really for the past 20 years in Yellowstone National Park and then also in more rural environments in Georgia. But we started looking at urban coyote populations in 2015. We formed the Atlanta Coyote Project with sort of a 3-fold mission, and that is, first of all, to provide public education and outreach. Secondly, to leverage the public to collect coyote observations, which we do through our website. That's been a wonderful resource. And then we are scientists. We want to conduct scientific research on coyotes and other forms of urban wildlife. We don't just look at coyotes in a vacuum, but we're interested in how coyotes fit into the overall ecosystem. So that's what we do. Before I tell you a bit about coyote biology and natural history, I think it's important, first of all, for us to understand where the coyote fits in the grand scheme of things with respect to North American canids. So I'm showing 4 animals here, of course. So, and they all belong to the same genus, and that genus is Canis. And the top dog here is the gray wolf, Canis lupus. And literally, it's a large animal. It's 120 plus pounds. We're going to talk a little bit about the historic distribution of these animals, but let's just set the stage. So Canis lupus, the gray wolf. The red wolf is Canis rufus. So same genus, different species. Coyote is Canis latrans, and then the domestic dog is Canis familiaris. And you can see the sizes of these various animals. Again, the gray wolf being the largest, red wolf slightly smaller, coyote smaller still, and then domestic dogs can range anywhere from 2 pounds to 150 pounds, if not more. So I just want to emphasize that these animals are all members of the same genus. They evolved, the other 3 evolved from the gray wolf. I want to show a few slides about the historic distribution of wolves and coyotes in North America. I'm not going to say a lot more about domestic dogs right now, but looking at this map of the historic distribution of wolves and coyotes, what you're seeing here is, just to get you oriented, is the eastern half of the United States and Canada. So if you look at the legend, the gray is the historic gray wolf distribution. The green hashed lines, historic coyote distribution. So you can see west of the Mississippi River, evolutionarily, the gray wolf and the coyote co-evolved. They were sympatric species. In other words, they were in the same location. The red wolf, conversely, was here in the southeast where I am located, and you can see that the gray wolf and the coyote were not in the southeast. And if we look then up here in the top portion of this map, around the Great Lakes on into Canada, we're seeing also that gray wolves, the distribution of gray wolves extended into that area. But there was likely some hybridization, some so-called admixture that went on, and it's thought to have occurred probably in this area. And that's what this kind of blue area is showing, is that there were potentially some admixture going on between gray wolves and coyotes, potentially between coyotes and red wolves as well. So, so we know that that's physiologically able to happen, but it's not common. And these animals, again, are recognized as separate species, and they are geographically isolated from one another, or they are very different in size, as is the case with the coyote and the gray wolf. Well, what happened over time? What happened over time is we as humans, unfortunately, did a really good job of extirpating wolves, particularly here in the southeast and also in the northeast. So the gray wolf was essentially wiped out around the Great Lakes and on into Canada. It still exists at low population levels. The red wolf here in the southeast was almost completely extirpated. And now the only place in the world that red wolves exist in the wild is a place called Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. That's what this little red dot is right here. This is coastal North Carolina. There are only about 30 to 40 individual red wolves that are there. They were placed there back in the 1980s by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a way to hopefully build the population back up. All of the remaining red wolves that were in the wild, which there weren't very many of them, they were taken to this place, Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. It's a very isolated place with the hope of trying to build that population back up. It's been had mixed success, and we don't have time to go into all of that today, but that's the historic distribution of the red and gray wolf and the coyote. Now, what happened is, as these wolves were extirpated, as they were removed from these areas, it easily allowed the coyote to simply fill that vacuum. So the only thing that was keeping coyotes out of the southeast was the presence of the red wolf. And once the red wolf was gone, the coyote very easily moved in. And so now we have coyotes in all states of the United States except for Hawaii. They have not swum to Hawaii yet, but they are very good swimmers. And so maybe someday they'll get there, but they are throughout North America. They're throughout the United States. They're on into Canada. They're down into South America. Let me show you on this next slide here. This is showing the again, range expansion of the coyote through time. You're seeing essentially three different colors on this map. The darkest color is before 1700. So historically, coyotes, again, were west of the Mississippi River and sort of east of the Rocky Mountains. Lewis and Clark, when they were exploring the Louisiana Purchase in the 1800s, early 1800s, they first encountered what they now, what we now know were coyotes in what is North Dakota. So this was an animal that was not in the Southeast or in the East for that matter. Native Americans certainly knew about these animals, but individuals, European settlers that were found in the eastern half of North America were not familiar with these animals. So again, before 1700, west of the Mississippi River, really an animal that was on the plains and extended down into Mexico. Early 1900s or late 1800s into the early 1900s, we start to see an expansion westward. We start to see expansion of coyotes into the Great Lakes region and on into the Northeast. And then starting in about 1940, coyotes start to move into the Southeast. And so now, again, as I said, we've got coyotes throughout all 49 continental US states, on into Alaska, Canada, down into Mexico. They're actually through Central America. They're knocking on the door of South America. They'll likely get into South America eventually. So why did this happen? Well, again, as I mentioned, the eradication of top predators, wolves in particular, gray wolves and red wolves. So that paved the way for the expansion of coyote populations, but also habitat modification. As we as humans cut down forest and converted it to agricultural areas, and as we urbanized, this is perfect habitat for coyotes. Coyotes do very well around human settlements. For a variety of reasons. They don't need large areas like wolves do. They eat smaller prey items than wolves. They eat a wider variety of items, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So this helps us to understand why coyote expansion has occurred over the last 100 years, really. If we look at our own folklore, so we look at, Little Red Riding Hood and who's the villain in Little Red Riding Hood, it's the big bad wolf. We look at the three little pigs, who's going to huff and puff and blow down the house of the three little pigs. It's again the big bad wolf. And so, we as humans throughout history, we have been fearful of wolves in particular. We compete for some of the same resources. Of course, in other ways, we befriended them. It's why we have domestic dogs now, as we domesticated some gray wolves. So we've had this kind of love-hate relationship with predators, particularly canid predators, particularly gray and red wolves, and that has influenced the distribution of the coyote. So let's take a look then at a little more detail about coyotes. Again, the biology and natural history, just some characteristics of coyotes. They are between 25 and 40 pounds. 40 pounds would be a very large coyote. So these animals are a lot smaller than most people think. They're smaller than gray and red wolves. They are larger than foxes. We do have two kinds of foxes here in the United States. The gray fox and the red fox, so they're larger than that. So 25 to 40 pounds, most are around 30 pounds. These animals, coyotes, live in family groups. They live much like human family groups. So there's mom and dad, we call that the alpha male and female, and they are trying to live their lives as residents. They are trying to, again, mate up. They will mate for life. They will try to establish a territory, and they will raise their offspring in that territory year after year. That's what their goal is. And in fact, individuals who are the offspring, some of them will stick around in subsequent years to raise their younger brothers and sisters. Others may disperse, and they likely will disperse, and they will turn into what we call transient individuals. And these are individuals that are out on the landscape now trying to find mates in their own territory. So they've been sent off to college to go and make their way in the world. But it's interesting is that, again, about coyotes is that The whole family is involved in rearing the offspring. That's mom, that's dad, and that's older siblings potentially. And they are helping to rear those offspring. But it is a family group. So when we talk about a pack of coyotes, that's really a misnomer because we're really just talking about a family group, and that group size changes depending on the time of year. Coyotes are very seasonal breeders. They breed in the winter time. They have a 2-month gestation period. So that means that pups are born in the spring, usually mid-March, give or take, depending on where we are in North America, but it's usually in mid-March. And these animals grow up fast. They're sexually mature in the first year. So that means they can theoretically have offspring of their own the next year. Now, of course, that requires a mate, it requires territory. So normally that's not the case. These so-called subadults or these yearlings are generally not reproductive. We change that, unfortunately, as humans when we intervene in their life cycle, but typically that does not happen. These animals are very elusive. They want nothing to do with us. They can be active at any time of day or night. They'll turn nocturnal if they want to avoid humans. That's often what they do in urban and suburban areas, is they become nocturnal or crepuscular. That means active at dawn or dusk. But to see a coyote out during the day is not necessarily cause for alarm. These animals are perfectly happy being active in diurnal times. They're successful in a variety of habitat types, from very rural to urban. We see coyotes in all kinds of habitats. Coyotes have been seen in Central Park in New York. We see coyotes in downtown Atlanta. So they're very successful in a variety of habitat types. They're really omnivores. They eat a wide variety of things. So they're eating small prey, small animals, but they also eat lots of fruits and seeds. I'm going to show you something about this in video in just a minute. And then the other thing, if you know anything about coyotes, or maybe if you've not seen them, you have heard them, because they use auditory, what we call auditory, and also olfactory mechanisms to help maintain those territories, to defend those territories, and to communicate with family members. And so I've got a little video that I'm going to show you that illustrates how this works. So everybody, everything okay, Kelly, from your end?
Yeah, I think everything's going well. We've got people adding questions to the Q&A and some in chat.
Yeah, I'm not paying attention to questions at the moment, so I'm sure we'll get to those eventually. But let me just show you all a little video. I'm going to, again, share my screen. And this just kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. This is from our website, so you can go and watch this if you want. But this is showing how coyotes behave and maintain these territories. So what you're seeing, this is nighttime from a remote camera. This is the adult male. This is in the middle of the summer. It's just it was kind of a, humid night here in the Southeast. That's why you're seeing all that mist. That's typical of what we get here in Georgia in the summertime. So here's the male. He's by himself right now, you'll see, and just listen to what he does.
Chris, I'm not seeing or hearing anything. So I just
okay. All right. Sorry.
You might be pulling it up on a different screen.
Not seeing that video, eh? Okay. Huh. Well, let me try that again. Okay. Let's see.
You can also try sending me the link, and I can always pull it up, see if it works on mine.
How about that? Are you seeing a page from our website?
I am, and I can see where the video was playing, but I never saw or heard much of anything.
Okay, I wonder if YouTube has something turned off. Okay, well, anyway, I think I'll skip over that in the interest of time. I'll try it one more time. Let me not go to full screen. How about that? Are you seeing the video play?
I am seeing it play.
Okay, I'll let it go this time. Sorry about that. So again, this is the adult male. You're hearing that?
Can't hear it, but I can definitely see it. Do you have the mute on the video?
No, well,
Usually that's
no, I
default.
don't. Well, anyway, I'll let this play. I'm sorry about that. But here we're seeing now the adult male and female. The male is on the right, female's on the left, and the male is going to mark the territory. So he's going to lift his leg. It's again a little hard to see, but he lifts his leg. He's marking the territory, and the female's going to come in behind him, and she's going to squat, and she's also going to mark the territory. So this is just an example of, again, how these animals, here's the female during the day. Again, she's going to squat and you're going to see her mark the territory. So this is, again, just an illustration of how these animals maintain their territories and communicate with one another. Okay, so let me go back to my PowerPoint and just a few more slides here. So okay, are we back to the PowerPoint?
Yep, I see the PowerPoint. It's just
All
not
right.
full screen yet.
Okay. Now, good.
Yep, looks good.
So here is a slide just showing again what this life cycle looks like. This was taken in 2014, this series of photographs. If we start here in the upper left, it's a little hard to see, but that's a pregnant mom. This is the end of March. She's kind of buried back into some bamboo, so it's a little hard to see her. But 3 months later, here's this pup appeared, and this is the very same location. And we were able to follow this individual. Don't know if it's male or female, but this pup, here it is at about 3 months old, here in the upper right, about 4.5 months old, down in the lower left, 5.5 months old. Here's October, 6.5 months old. And this little pup had a scar on its nose. Maybe you can see that right here. That's how we know we've got the same individual. Here it is in December, middle of December at 8.5 months old. This animal is now sexually mature and is essentially fully grown, even though it's not even yet a year old. So it shows you how fast they grow up. So a little bit about what coyotes eat. As I mentioned, small mammals. This is a coyote. Here's a squirrel on the left-hand side of the screen, and here it is on the right-hand side. There's the squirrel hanging out of a coyote's mouth. So small mammals, rats, mice, rabbits, snakes, but then these other things that some people might be surprised: persimmons, grass, beetles, eggs, garbage, you name it. But you want to consider the size, the availability of the particular prey item, the effort that it takes. So these things have, again, very wide diets. I'll show you one more video here very quickly about what these animals eat. Again, this comes from our website. So there's no sound with this, so I'll just let the video play. And this just shows very quickly some of the interesting things that coyotes eat. This is very, are you seeing that, Kelly, play?
Yep, still seeing it
Okay.
play.
This is a persimmon tree, and it's hard to see, but that coyote is jumping up to get these fruits. So they'll go to great lengths. Here in the Southeast, this tree is very common. So they love those fruits when they're available in the fall. This is actually taken down on the coast. This was a coyote we observed out during the day on an island. We watched it for a half of an hour in just an empty field. It was clearly looking for something to eat. It kept digging little holes, and this is what it was eating, is little beetle larvae. So just an example of the different types of foods that coyotes eat, in addition to animal foods as well. Let me just go back to the PowerPoint briefly. Sorry here. Oops. So that really talks about the biology and the natural history of the coyote. I'll just say very briefly that one of the things that we also study with the Atlanta Coyote Project is melanism, a genetic trait that is rare in most coyote populations. We seem to have a higher occurrence of it here in the Southeast for a variety of reasons. We published a paper about this in 2014, and recently we have been working with this particular striking animal that was discovered roaming around the streets of Atlanta in late December of 2019. It was actually exhibiting playful, friendly behavior towards dogs, believe it or not. It was jumping fences, it was trying to play with dogs. It tried to go through someone's doggy door. It still had very much aversion to humans. So it wasn't going close to humans, but it was trying to play with dogs. And so very interesting. After much deliberation, we realized this was probably not going to end well. And so we intervened and we moved this animal to a wildlife sanctuary just outside of Atlanta. He was dubbed Carmine by the public, named after this character from the old Laverne and Shirley show, if any of you are old enough to remember that. And we published a paper about this that you can access from our website. It's called The Interface of Human Wildlife Interactions, an example of a bold coyote in Atlanta, Georgia. We also, PBS made a documentary about this that is streamed from our homepage of our website. So if you're interested in learning more about that. So I don't want to take up too much time. I want to allow Fran time to talk. So I won't take any questions right now, but I guess at the end we can do that.
Yep, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So pop those in the Q&A. And then we're going to have limited time for Q&A because we're going to try and keep this to an hour, folks. But we are going to be putting or saving these questions. We're going to have Fran and Chris answer them, and then we're going to put them in a blog post that'll come out in a week or two, depending on our schedules. Understand we have a lot going on in our lives, but we're going to try to get those to you in the next couple of weeks, along with the recording from this webinar. So thank you, Chris, for sharing all of that wonderful information. I did not know about Carmine, so I'm gonna have to go check out his story. That looks really great. Fran, you're next if you want to start sharing.
One second here. Okay, perfect. Okay, folks. Hi, thanks for joining us. My name is Francisco Santiago Avila. I'm the Science and Conservation Manager for Paya Coyote, and I'm going to be taking you through coyote policies in the Midwest mostly, but these are generally applicable to most states across the country, and our work on coyote coexistence. So we're going to start with coyote policies throughout the Midwest. And first, we're going to talk a little bit about trapping. Seasons for trapping generally cover fall and winter periods. So generally from mid-October, early November to late January. Sometimes they go all the way to mid-late March. So a fair amount of time, especially considering that during this time, there's a lot of, as Chris mentioned, a lot of coyote breeding going on that just is during the gestation period. So there's a lot of concerns of what trapping does to the population, and especially pregnant mothers, pups, etc. There are generally no limits on the amount of coyotes that you can kill via trapping, and there are also generally no reporting requirements for this practice in most states. In addition to that, in terms of the methods that are allowed for this type of practice, not only leg hold traps, as you see on the right, but also a lot of states allow cable restraints and snares, which we know are extremely painful for coyotes and all other animals. Now, trapping, of course, causes tremendous pain and suffering to the victims of the practice. It causes painful injuries from the trap. It causes painful injuries from trying to flee capture and the trap itself. Sometimes individuals caught in these traps try to sort of chew their own body parts off to escape the traps. It also includes harm that is additional to injuries like thirst, dehydration, so exposure to the elements, hunger as well. And of course, depending on the time of year that you do this, you might be creating super additive mortality by making pups orphans as well. So we know that also trapping is highly indiscriminate. You just basically place these traps on the landscape and you just trap someone in them. So there is a lot of non-target catch, quote unquote catch, that is sort of a bycatch, quote unquote, from these activities. That includes imperiled species, but it also includes companion animals. And you see this more frequently in the news, issues of dogs, especially getting caught on traps that are set for other animals. Now, important thing to mention about trapping is that it generally serves no ecological or management purposes. In fact, over 80 countries and 7 US states have banned some traps, some kind of traps, but it is still a preferred tool of US wildlife, quote unquote, management for states as well as federal agencies. And in fact, the US Department of Agriculture, Wildlife Services kills over 100,000 animals by trapping every year, including around 19,000 coyotes. And again, that is only one agency that traps across the country. Oh, and I'll mention also that, to the extent that agencies engage in not only allowing but promoting this practice, I wanted to bring as an example this brochure that you can find on the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources website. It's called Regulated Trapping in Social Media, but in fact, what it does, and you can again look it up on your own time, is provide trappers with tips on how to display their trapped animals in social media in a way that it's not going to elicit any negative reaction from other individuals, the public at large. So some of the tips that they give is to, for example, clean any blood that is around the animal, to put the animal's tongue back in their mouth, and to generally put it in an area where blood is not going to be seen, and injuries, pictures where injuries of the animal are not going to be seen either, to mitigate any negative response to the practice. Now, next is hunting. So hunting is a little bit more egregious than trapping. Seasons for coyotes are generally year-round, so they're open seasons. There's no closed seasons for coyotes in most states. In terms of hunting hours, a lot of states allow regular hunting hours, but some allow you to kill coyotes through hunting throughout the day and night. So they allow night hunting for coyotes, which is something that is not allowed for most species. In terms of methods, you see in the pictures there, there's a variety of methods that are used. You can use dogs, you can use archery devices, handguns, rifles, shotguns, electronic calling and baiting devices, and a variety of sights, scopes, and lights if you're hunting at night, for example. Same as with trapping, there are no limits on the amount of coyotes that you can kill in most states, so quote unquote bag limits for coyotes. And there are also no specific reporting requirements for the amount of coyotes that you kill. So this makes this extremely concerning, the fact that there are no limits, there are no reporting requirements, because it questions the numbers that are coming out of agencies and not the estimate in terms of how many coyotes are being killed in each of these practices. And just to give you an example of the numbers that are coming out, even though potentially these are underestimates of the amount of coyotes killed, in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin DNR estimates that there are over 26,000 coyotes that are hunted and trapped every year, split evenly between both practices. In Illinois, there could be as little as 77,000 coyotes killed, as many as potentially over 100,000 coyotes killed by hunting, and around 16,000 trapped. Minnesota, to the extent that we know, they don't collect this information, so there's a huge question mark there on how many individual coyotes are being killed. And in Iowa, which in fact the numbers that Iowa uses are numbers reported by licensed fur dealers instead of trappers or hunters. So this is only for trapping. Around 18,000 coyotes are trapped every year, according to those reports by licensed fur dealers. So a lot of coyotes being killed in these states. And again, this is generally applicable to a lot of other states in the Midwest, as well as outside the Midwest. So the fact that there are both no quote unquote bag limits for hunting and that there are no reporting requirements also promotes another even more concerning type of activity. And these are wildlife killing contests. On wildlife killing contests, participants compete to kill most commonly coyotes, but also other species like foxes, raccoons, sometimes crows as well, for both prizes and entertainment in a variety of categories. And I have there some examples. There's categories for most animals killed, but also the largest animal, the smallest, the ugliest, sometimes by sex, so largest male, largest female, etc., as well as other categories. And these contests are essentially allowed because they promote this lack of restriction on hunting. So there's no trapping done on wildlife killing contests. You have to hunt the animals. And so they exploit this lack of killing limits for hunting, lack of restrictions for killing, lack of reporting requirements, and a variety of deregulation of the methods and devices that you can use for hunting these animals. I have pictures there from both a Wisconsin contest up top, a promotional picture from Facebook promoting the Wisconsin's largest wildlife killing contest, coyote killing contest, which is called Moondog Madness. And the lower picture is a picture from the results of the Southern Illinois Predator Challenge held in Illinois every year. And dozens of contests are held throughout the Midwest, most states in the Midwest every year. We've identified over 40 contests held in Wisconsin every year and around 30 in Illinois. Now, generally, wildlife killing contests, according to the literature, don't serve any ecological, conservation, or wildlife management purpose. And in fact, Project Coyote has drafted a statement alongside over 70 conservation scientists stating why wildlife killing contests don't serve any conservation or management purpose. And before we get into those, I just want to state that this type of practice, killing contests, are an extreme form of lethal intervention in the sense that participants are encouraged to maximize their killing. So they're not encouraged to go out there and kill an animal and that'll be that, or kill one or two animals and that's fine. Within these contests, you get the prize if you are the team that has killed the most individuals. So they're encouraged to maximize their killing indiscriminately and across the landscape. So what does that statement have drafted by Project Coyote alongside these scientists? It basically provides evidence that the reasons that are given for holding these contests don't add up when you look at the science. So for example, one reason that's commonly given is that killing coyotes is going to solve or mitigate human-wildlife conflict. And this is actually not true, simply because these contests and indiscriminate killing in general doesn't target the individuals that may be involved in conflict, doesn't target the sites where the conflict occurred or the times when the incident occurred. And so potentially you might even be making things worse. So you might be increasing the risk of conflict, increasing the risk of predation on domesticated animals, for example, through the disruption of the individual behavior and social dynamics of coyotes and coyote families. Like, for example, you're breaking up coyote families and potentially individuals that relied on that cooperative exercise of maintaining a territory and being able to hunt in that territory are then going to disperse, potentially causing more problems. Now, what does the science say about the claim that killing coyotes is going to result in decreased coyote populations? Well, again, the science actually says the contrary to that. In killing, we have their diagram provided by the Humane Society of the United States that explains that killing tends to catalyze an increased reproductive response by coyotes that will overcompensate for their killing through both increased litters, because you're breaking up coyote families, and so individuals that were subordinate but that actually have the capability to reproduce are then going to find other mates and reproduce. So you're going to get more litters. You're also going to get potentially increased pup survival based on the amount of resources, the higher resources per capita that are going to be immediately available because you have decimated the coyotes in the area. So the claim that wildlife killing contests is going to result in decreased coyote populations is actually, it contradicts the scientific literature. Now, another reason that's given is that killing coyotes is going to increase prey populations, like duck populations, for example. And this is something that a lot of public agencies as well as hunting organizations have acknowledged is not true. So I have, for example, there's a statement from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources that states simply that predators consume other species, but that is not what's causing a decline in those particular species. It is, in fact, actually habitat, other conditions like climate, what leads more and affects more the population trends of these species. And this is something that has been acknowledged, as I mentioned, by hunting organizations like the Isaac Walton League in Minnesota put out a statement opposing wildlife killing contests. And for example, the Ducks Unlimited and the National Wild Turkey Federation, both on their websites, have statements against the indiscriminate killing of predators for these purposes. So now, if wildlife killing contests don't serve any ecological and management purposes, and yet people continue to engage in them, then that leaves a particular reason for engaging in this type of activity, which is recreation and entertainment as the main motivation for engaging in the indiscriminate killing of coyotes and other species. So again, this can be used as an extreme form of trophy hunting. For me, it seems like trophy hunting on steroids, to the extent that in trophy hunting, you go out there and you kill your trophy animal, and that pretty much is it. And you don't need to go out there and kill another being. But again, here in wildlife killing contests, you are incentivized to just go out there and kill beings until you just can't find any more on the landscape, or your time to do so for gaining that prize runs out. So to the extent that recreation and entertainment are the main motivators for engaging in this type of behavior, this actively fosters cruelty and contempt for the lives of wild animals in nature. It fosters the wanton waste of the animals killed, because a lot of these animals cannot, even their pelts cannot be used because they were hunted rather than trapped, and so the pelts are damaged. And it does so in people of all ages, like when in the picture I showed, I was mentioning hunting, of kids holding weapons, in front of a mound of dead coyotes. Now this is directly opposed to what we see in terms of broad public values towards coyotes and wildlife. And for example, in Illinois, where we have ongoing efforts to ban wildlife killing contests, over 2/3 of Illinoisans would support a ban on wildlife killing contests if they were supplied with minimal information on their occurrence and impacts. And in fact, our experience in Illinois has been that individuals don't really know that these activities and these contests are happening in their state. They mostly associate them with activities out in some states out west, like Texas. They never think that Illinois is home to so many of these contests. And in Wisconsin, we've been involved in supporting proposals to ban wildlife killing contests, and these proposals, citizen resolutions, have been supported by most people in the state participating in these surveys, and yet are rejected by public agencies charged with upholding public values and public views. But nonetheless, we continue to carry on the work of attempting to ban these contests nationwide. So, and there's a variety of actions that we take and that you can take as an individual as well to ban these contests wherever you are. So for example, at the state level, we engage in legislation, in agency rulemaking with state agencies to ban these contests, and 8 states have already enacted bans through commission or agency rulemaking, and you can see those in the map right there. 5 out of those 8 states have done so through agency rulemaking. So it's not unthinkable that agencies are going to ban these practices, and there's a variety of ways that they can do this, like prohibiting the contest outright, prohibiting wanton waste, setting closed seasons for coyotes, setting some kind of killing limits for coyotes, and setting reporting requirements. But also you can be engaged in prohibiting these contests at a more local level. For example, Dane County in 2018, Dane County, Wisconsin passed a resolution to ban wildlife killing contests within the county. So those contests are not allowed in Dane County anymore. And you can also oppose individual wildlife killing contests if you know of a local contest in your area. A good example here provided by Chris was the Georgia Coyote Challenge, which was an annual killing contest that was launched actually by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources in March 2017, and that through the efforts of the Atlanta Coyote Project, scientists, advocacy organizations like ours, it was banned, and it only lasted a couple of years. It sort of fizzled out based on the public response to that type of activity. Now, as a contrast to wildlife killing contests and those values of recreation and entertainment to kill individuals, I wanted to highlight the values that we try to promote in our work in Project Coyote and in the protection and coexistence with coyotes. So first, being that animals are thinking, self-aware, and value their lives and well-being. And so that includes that they are valuable as beings, as ends in themselves. We promote ethical coexistence as well, which means mitigating negative interactions and promoting positive ones. And we promote understanding, respect, so considering the well-being of coyotes, and stewardship, so a duty and obligation to responsibly care for coyotes and all wildlife. And we follow some guidelines when we're talking about coexistence with coyotes. First one is, of course, education and outreach, which should be frequent and ongoing, and it should be also effective education. And in fact, there are studies that state that that efforts to promote positive emotional connections to wildlife may be a better way to increase acceptance than only focusing on biological knowledge. So along with that, we try to promote that coyotes are part of both our ecological and our moral community, and we shouldn't think of them as invading human areas, but that they belong in those areas. We also, of course, practice proactive and preventive measures and promote those measures, including behavior modification, especially of humans, and we focus on non-lethal, least harmful interventions first and foremost to resolve any type of incidents. And so one of the most common types of incidents that we deal with is coyotes and attacks on pets. Many of these confrontations are seasonal and are the result of bulldog behaviors or off-leash dogs running into coyote territories, especially during times where coyotes are either caring for their pups or rearing their pups. And that's going to inevitably cause conflict. So some common sense guiding rules for preventing those conflicts is to leash your pets, to of course not let pets outside unsupervised unless you have a secured backyard. And even then, it's a good idea to not let pets go unsupervised. And if you're in a coyote area and you have a small dog, you can protect your small dog by just picking them up. If you see a coyote, avoid walking near brushy areas where coyotes might be hiding or having some dens around, and avoid the times of day when coyotes are going to be most active. And of course, other rules for coexistence with coyotes would be to not feed wildlife. In fact, a lot of conflicts with coyotes are the result of coyotes being habituated because they have been fed by some or other community members. So that highlights that these responses need to be community-wide. It also highlights that humans need to be responsible for removing any attractants that they may have on their properties, food, fruits, water, pet water bowls, anything of the sort that might attract a coyote. Again, as I mentioned, you should supervise your pets at all times. You should haze when appropriate, and you should always appreciate coyotes at a distance. Now, when to haze is a big question here. Generally, you want to haze when a coyote approaches you, your pet, your home, or yard, and you feel uncomfortable with the proximity of the coyote. And you can do this by acting big, bad, and loud. So you can yell and wave your arms while approaching the coyote. You can use noise makers like your voice, like whistles or air horns. You can just open and close an umbrella really quick while approaching the coyote. Some folks recommend the garbage bag method, which entails you just like snapping a huge black garbage bag while approaching the coyote as well. You can also use projectiles, so small rocks that you throw at the direction of the coyote instead of at the coyote. And you continue this behavior until the coyote responds by moving away from you. And when you should not haze is when coyotes may be protecting pups nearby, or when they're staying at a respectful distance away or appearing sick or injured. So it's not like you will see a coyote and you should immediately haze that individual. And lastly, we also work in collaboration with municipalities, wildlife agencies, humane societies, etc., in promoting community empowerment, consistent messaging, and agency collaboration. And our Coyote Friendly Communities program basically engages and educates urban and rural audiences with the tools, the resources, the expertise needed to foster coexistence. So among those, we help them craft coexistence plans. We provide everything from a yard audit checklist to informational door hangers, tip cards, and park signs and brochures in both English and Spanish for our communities. We also partner with the National Animal Care and Control Association to equip animal control officers with the best science-based and most current information and tools available to promote coexistence. And with that, I'll leave it at that and close up, and we'll be happy to take any questions, I think.
Thanks, Fran. All right. Well, we are going to try and get to the Q&A, but I just want people to know we are currently at over 19 messages in the Q&A, so we are clearly not going to get to answer them all. So I'll remind you again, pop them in there. We're going to try and answer a couple, and then I will send leftover questions to Fran and Chris. They're going to answer those, and we're going to try and get those in a blog post and then share the link in an email to everyone who registered for this webinar. So thank you again, Fran and Chris, for being here, for taking the time to share all that wonderful information. And so I've got just a few questions we'll start with. This one comes from Barbara. It can go to either of you. But Barbara asks, she mentioned that she had a female stash some coyote pups under her shed. And so she's concerned about them being in her backyard and wants to know more about denning practices and how she can protect them.
You want me to take that, Fran? I guess I would just say that if denning is already going on, it's best to just avoid the area. I know it can be inconvenient, but the best thing is to try to prevent it from happening. But if it's already happened, you're really just sort of asking for trouble if you get close to it. So if at all possible, and again, I know it can be inconvenient, you just need to try to avoid the area, keep people and dogs away from the area, because as Fran says, when we see conflict, that's oftentimes when it's, most common is when, those animals, those coyotes are going to be very protective of those pups in that den.
Thanks. Fran, do you have anything you want to add there?
No, I completely agree. Yeah, prevention is the best way forward, but once the denning happens, then yeah, it's almost asking for trouble to try any intervention at that point.
There's been a lot of questions asking about statistics around interbreeding between coyotes and dogs or coyotes and wolves. Do we have any information on the frequency and how maybe you could tell, other than a DNA test, if an animal has interbred with one of its wild canid species?
Yeah. Yeah, Fran, I'll start and you can pick up on that. We it's not that common. It's not as common as people think. Now again, as Kelly said, without DNA analysis, it's hard to say for sure, but you know, species want to avoid mating with members of a different species. It can be reproductively disadvantageous. It's a waste of effort, and it can lead to lower fitness. So for instance, Carmine, the black coyote that I talked about, this unfolded over about 6 weeks, and there was lots of public comment, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to publish a paper about this, is that we did genetically analyze Carmine. He's full coyote, and so lots of people saw him and said, well, that's a hybridization between a dog and a coyote. No, it was not the case, and so it's not as common as people think that it's going to happen.
Yeah. I'll add to that. The one thing that we know increases the chances of this happening is indiscriminate killing, to the point where individuals can't find another individual of their species to mate with. And so that forces them, almost pushes them towards hybridization with other species. There are studies about this with red wolves and coyotes. And that's why some coyotes are sterilized in red wolf areas so that they don't interbreed. There are also studies about this with red wolves and coyotes in Algonquin National Park in Ontario that basically conclude that the indiscriminate killing of wolves in the area almost pushes wolves to mate with coyotes, whereas areas that aren't hunted, that wolves are prohibited from being hunted, you don't see as much hybridization there.
That's a great point, Fran. I'll just throw in, I mentioned the admixture zone when I was showing some of my maps, and that's likely what was going on. Is we call that in biology the Ali effect. When the densities are low and you can't find a mate, then it's potentially more likely that you're going to mate with a different species. So that's a great point.
All right, we got time for 2 more questions. And so I'm going to kind of summarize. A lot of people have asked similar questions, such as, are coyotes getting bigger on average, or is there a trend on size? Some people have heard Western versus Eastern. Can we elaborate a little bit more on that?
You want to take that, Fran?
Oh, I thought you were going to take it.
You go ahead. You want to take that?
Yeah, they're generally the weight of coyotes. A lot of it has to do with the amount of admixture as well that's in the area. So potentially with this hybridization that we just talked about, that will affect, of course, the physiology of coyotes. And so it might be that in some areas where that admixture is a little bit higher, coyotes are going to be a little bit heftier. There's talk, for example, of coy wolves in the Northeast. And that's generally based on a little bit of what I mentioned has happened within that area and that admixture in Canada and how that plays out. It also depends on the prey species that they consume, and that can play a role on the weight. So the more, if you consume generally more deer, and that's something that coyotes in the East don't consume a lot of, you tend to be a larger individual so that you can prey on those species rather than if you're going for squirrels, rabbits, etc. But in general, I don't think there is an actual trend where all coyotes are getting heavier with time. We don't see that in the literature.
Right.
All right. So I'll just do one quick last question because we are at the top of the hour. But we had some people concerned, and Fran, you touched a little bit on this in your presentation. But some people concerned that cats or raccoons or other animals might be a part of a coyote's diet. Can you share a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, the studies that I've seen don't really point to raccoons being a big part of coyote diets. Generally, they avoid coyotes because of the concern over just suppression and them being killed by coyotes. The amount of cats on coyotes' diet varies regionally. So for example, in Southern Carolina, in Southern California, there are some estimates put the amount of cats in coyote diet around like 20% sometimes. But that seems to be very local to the extent that studies from the Northeast, from the Southeast, and other areas put coyote cats on coyote diets at 1% or less. So it might be a huge concern, but if it is a huge concern, it's very localized. Generally, cats are very good at avoiding coyotes as well. And so the effect that coyotes have on cats is more of just like a competitive, suppressive one of affecting their roaming and the times when they are active.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.
All right, guys, so that is the hour. I just want to remind everybody to please check out Heartland Rewilding's website at heartlandrewilding.org. And if you put a /events on the end of that, you can sign up for our 2 upcoming webinars in this series. And then also to check out the Atlanta Coyote Project's website. A lot of those videos Chris was showing, they're on there, so much more information. And then if you're concerned about coyotes or other wildlife in your neighborhood or have neighbors who are concerned, you can learn more at projectcoyote.org, as well as the Heartland Rewilding's website. If you put heartlandrewilding.org/CWW, which stands for Coexisting with Wildlife, you can scroll to the bottom and we've got several free resources on there for you to download, including a helpful yard audit, which will help you determine whether or not you're attracting wildlife to your yard. For some people, that may be a positive, for others, a negative. There's ways we can help to make our neighborhoods and our communities more coexistence friendly. So please check out all these resources. Reach out to Heartland Rewilding, to Atlanta Coyote Project if you have any questions. And then a reminder, we're going to be sending out an email in the next week or 2, depending on how our schedules go. It's a crazy time of year for us. But we're going to get that out. It'll have a link to the recording, but you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Heartland Rewilding, and you'll get that notification as soon as we put that online. And then we're also going to have these follow-up questions in a blog on our website. So check that out. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.